Imagine this. A small nation, barely 2 decades old, finding itself staring down one of the biggest military forces on Earth. It really is like David and Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
Except this David, well, they just refused to go down quietly. Sounds like a myth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it actually happened.
It really did. A chilling piece of history.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into that exact moment.
Mm.
The Winter War. Finland versus the Soviet Union. It kicked off November 30, 1939, went through to March 13, 1940.
Yeah, and on paper, this should have been over in, what, days? A week, maybe?
Exactly.
Huh.
But instead, it became this incredible story of just sheer national will.
And that's our mission today, really, to understand how Finland, vastly outnumbered, outgunned, you name it, how did they not just survive? How did they come out of this with this incredibly strong national identity?
We want to dig into the tactics, sure, but also that societal unity, that Finnish spirit you often hear it called sisu.
That's right. That grit, that resilience. How did that fuel their resistance against, well, what seemed like impossible odds?
So this isn't just about battles and dates. It's the story of a whole people pulling together. It shows you what can happen when a nation really digs deep to defend itself. Let's unpack it.
Okay, so where do we start? To get Finland's stand, you really need the backstory.
Right. The historical context is key. So Finland was part of the Russian Empire for, what, over 100 years?
Yeah, from 1809 to 1917. As a grand duchy, so they had some autonomy culturally, politically.
Then came the Russian Revolution, 1917. Finland declares independence. Lenin actually recognized it, didn't he, early 1918?
He did. But independence wasn't peaceful. It led straight into a really brutal civil war in Finland itself.
Yes, the Reds versus the Whites, essentially. Socialists, backed by the Bolsheviks against the bourgeois forces who got German help.
Exactly. And those divisions, those scars, they ran deep. It created this profound mistrust, especially towards the Soviet Union, that just lingered.
And from the Soviet side.
Yep.
That mistrust was mutual, I gather.
Oh, absolutely. And it went back further. You know, economic ties were pretty minimal, despite the border. The Soviets worried about how Finland treated its communists.
And there was history there, too, right? Finnish involvement against Soviet Russia earlier.
Definitely. Between 1918 and 1922, thousands of Finnish volunteers fought in expeditions against Soviet Russia. They even held territory near Leningrad for a bit in 1920.
Okay, so that sets a precedent.
It does. So by the late 30s, Stalin's looking to reclaim lost imperial lands, but also, crucially, secure Leningrad. It was only, 50 kilometers from the Finnish border?
Got close. Wow.
Yeah. He saw Finland, the Baltics, the Karelian Isthmus especially, as potential threats, staging grounds for attacks, vulnerabilities for his Baltic fleet.
So then comes the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in '39.
Yeah.
That infamous deal between Germany and the USSR carving up Eastern Europe.
Right. And once that ink was dry, the Soviets turned their focus squarely on Finland.
And they came with demands.
Yeah.
What exactly were they asking for? Sounds like a tough spot for Finland.
It was incredibly tough. The Soviets demanded quite a bit of territory on the Karelian Isthmus. They wanted a lease for the Hanko Peninsula for a naval base and some islands in the Gulf of Finland.
All for Leningrad security, they claim.
That was the justification, yes. They offered some land in return, bigger area, but much less valuable land up in East Karelia.
And Finland said?
Finland said no, firmly rejected it. Their foreign minister, Urkko, he actually thought the Red Army wasn't ready for a fight. Plus, the government knew the Finnish parliament would never agree to giving up so much land.
But the Soviets weren't really negotiating, were they?
Doesn't seem like it. They staged this incident, the Manila incident, November 26th, claimed Finnish artillery fired on them. Total fabrication.
The classic pretext.
Exactly. Molotov broke ties, and then November 30th, the Red Army attacked. No declaration of war, just invasion.
The difference in forces here is just mind-boggling. Can you paint a picture of that imbalance?
It's hard to even grasp. Finland had maybe 250,000 soldiers, but probably only 200,000 really in combat roles.
Okay. And the Soviets?
They started with about 500,000 soldiers, 22 divisions. But by the end of the war, they'd thrown in maybe 1 million soldiers, nearly 60 divisions.
1 million.
But the equipment gap was even worse. Roughly 3 Soviet soldiers for every Finn, 5 Soviet artillery pieces for every Finnish one, and tanks. It was about 80 Soviet tanks for every 1 Finnish tank.
80 to 1.
Yeah.
That's not even a fight. That's just annihilation on paper.
It looked that way.
And how prepared was Finland, materially speaking? Did they have the gear for this?
Honestly, They were badly unprepared. They lacked modern weapons, not enough automatic weapons, anti-tank guns, maybe 100 imported from Sweden.
And the tanks. The what, against the 80?
They had 30 tanks total, and they'd only just got them weeks before.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. There's that infamous quote from their minister, President Culloden, just months before the war, saying he was glad Finland spent money on useful things instead of quickly outdated war material.
Ouch. You can almost feel the historical irony there. Hindsight is brutal.
Isn't it just? Meanwhile, the Soviets had this plan for a quick, decisive victory. Blitz the Karelian Isthmus, occupy the whole country. They even aimed to capture Oulu up north to cut Finland in two. Thought it'd be over in weeks.
So given all the numbers, the lack of gear, the Soviet plan, how did Finland even begin to defend itself? Especially on that vital Karelian Isthmus front.
Well, their main defense there was the Mannerheim Line. Now you hear a line and think maybe like the Maginot Line, these huge fortifications.
Right, impenetrable concrete walls.
Not quite. It was more a series of about 100 concrete bunkers. Some weren't even that strong structurally, but they were cleverly integrated with lots of field fortifications, trenches, obstacles, barbed wire, especially strong near key points like Suma.
So smart use of what they had.
Yeah.
It wasn't just concrete, was it? How else did they fight back? They seemed to use the environment itself.
Brilliantly. That was key. Finland in winter is brutal. Deep snow, dense forests, and temperatures. Well, dropping to minus 40 Celsius. Yeah. Which was terrible for Soviet tanks and trucks. They were stuck on the roads, easy targets. The Finns, though, they were masters of winter warfare.
On skis.
Exactly. Highly mobile ski units. They could move fast, silently through terrain the Soviets couldn't handle, like ghosts in the snow. They even had heated tents, which was a massive advantage in that cold.
And then there are the Molotov cocktails. That name itself is quite something.
Isn't it? A bit of grim Finnish humor aimed at the Soviet foreign minister, Molotov. He'd claimed Soviet planes were dropping food parcels, not bombs.
So the Finns called their homemade anti-tank weapons Molotov cocktails. Basically bottles of flammable liquid.
Yeah, simple but surprisingly effective against the tanks of the time, especially when aimed at engine vents. Real improvisation born from necessity. And that sisu, that determination, really showed here.
That ingenuity must have paid off early on. Did they manage to surprise the Soviets initially?
They absolutely did. The Soviet 7th Army got bogged down on the Mannerheim Line. Their advance was painfully slow. Stalin was furious, apparently, and even replaced the commander.
And the Finns held major attacks.
Yes. In December 1939, they beat back big Soviet assaults at places like Taipale and Suma. And incredibly, they did it without even needing their reserves. Huge for morale.
And up north, away from the main line, they had those Mahti tactics.
That sounds fascinating. What exactly was that?
Mahti is a Finnish word for a pile of logs, like cut firewood. The tactic involved using their ski troops' mobility to slice into the long Soviet columns stuck on the forest roads.
Cut them off.
Exactly. Cut them off, encircle smaller sections of the Mahti, and then systematically destroy them. These were often large Soviet units, totally isolated, freezing, running out of food and ammo.
And this worked?
It worked spectacularly well in places like Suomussalmi. They decimated entire Soviet divisions, like 163rd and the 44th Motorized. Crucially, this stopped the Soviets from reaching Oulu and cutting Finland in half. A major strategic failure for the Soviets.
So these early Finnish successes, it wasn't just Finnish grit, it really highlighted some serious problems on the Soviet side, didn't it? Oh, absolutely. Shocking weaknesses, really. Poor training, especially for winter and forest conditions. Logistics were a disaster. Troops without proper winter clothing, camouflage, even skis.
In Finland. In winter.
Yeah.
Without skis.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And command was a mess. Officers were inexperienced, often scared to take initiative because of Stalin's purges years before. Coordination between tanks, infantry, artillery. It was just poor. A systemic failure, really.
Wow. And then Stalin tried a political move too, didn't he? Setting up a puppet government.
He did, a major political blunder looking back. He set up this Finnish communist, Otto Vilkuinen, in Terijoki, a town they'd captured. This puppet government then agreed to all the Soviet demands.
Hoping it would divide the Finns. Spark an uprising.
Exactly. He thought it would undermine the legitimate Finnish government and rally Finnish communists to his side.
But that's not what happened, right? It seems like it had the opposite effect. This is where that spirit of the Winter War really comes in.
Precisely. Instead of dividing Finland, it united them like never before. This shared existential threat, this blatant attempt to erase their independence. It created this incredible national unity. It actually healed many of the divisions left over from their own civil war.
It's amazing. Healing Civil War wounds because of an invasion.
It tapped into something deep, that sisu we talked about, that quiet, stubborn determination. Everyone, regardless of past politics, knew they were fighting for Finland's survival.
Is there a specific example that shows this unity in practice?
Yes, a really powerful one is the January engagement in 1940. For the first time ever, the Main Employers Association publicly recognized the Trade Union Federation as a legitimate partner. Imagine that, amidst a war for survival.
Wow, bridging huge social divides.
Exactly. The trade union chairman, Eero Vuori, said something like, employers and employees fight side by side at the front. The blood ties formed there will strengthen relations back home, too. It perfectly captured that spirit.
And the mood in Finland changed, from despair to hope.
Definitely. Initially, people were grim. The finance minister wrote about expecting defeat. But those early victories, even if people didn't know the full precarious picture, they fostered this belief that, hey, maybe we can win this. The nation really rallied.
But the Soviets weren't going to just stay defeated. They learned, didn't they? What was Stalin's reaction?
Stalin was furious and embarrassed. The Red Army's reputation was taking a beating internationally. So he brought in Semyon Timoshenko to take command of the whole front, and Timoshenko meant business. Massive reinforcements were brought in. The strategy shifted completely
From quick victory to?
to overwhelming force. Brutal, grinding attrition. Timoshenko's approach was just sheer numbers and firepower.
How overwhelming are we talking?
Think about this. On key sectors, they concentrated artillery to an unbelievable degree. Something like 48 heavy guns for every kilometer of front line, supported by long-range guns behind them. They called it a fire roll, just continuous pulverizing bombardment.
Just flattening everything.
Pretty much. And they formed specialized assault groups. Infantry, tanks, combat engineers, anti-tank guns, all working together specifically to take out those Finnish bunkers. They brought in new, heavier tanks too, KV-1s, T-34s starting to appear. Some even had flamethrowers.
Flamethrowers. Grim.
And, incredibly, to fix the officer shortage partly caused by the purges, they released about 4,000 prisoners from the gulags and sent them to the front lines as commanders.
Gulag prisoners commanding troops. That's desperate.
It shows how seriously they were taking it now. No more underestimation.
So when did this new, massive Soviet offensive hit?
The artillery started ramping up mid-January, just softening everything up, finding weaknesses. Then the main ground assault began February 11th, 1940.
And the Mannerheim Line.
It broke quickly. The sheer weight of fire, especially around Suma, we're talking 72 artillery pieces and 40 tanks per kilometer there. It just couldn't hold. The forward positions were overrun.
The Finns must have been reaching their absolute limit. That sisu can only take you so far against that kind of onslaught.
Exactly. The Finnish troops were utterly exhausted. Their reserves were gone. Their whole strategy had been pinned on holding that line. There was no real plan B, no room to retreat and regroup effectively.
Did they try counterattacks?
They did, but they were often disastrous. There was one involving 15 British Vickers tanks they'd acquired, but the tanks were technically outmatched, and apparently their sudden appearance panicked their own infantry who thought they were Soviet.
Oh, no. That's just awful.
It shows the desperation and confusion. By March 1st, the key city of Viipuri was surrounded. The situation was becoming untenable.
What about help from outside? The world was watching, surely. There was sympathy for Finland.
There was huge sympathy, and some material aid did arrive. Sweden sent rifles, the U.S. offered credit, France, UK, Italy sent some aircraft, but...
Too little, too late.
Yeah, mostly. It often got bogged down by logistics or politics. And sometimes the Allies' motives were complicated. They had their own strategic interests, like potentially intervening to cut off Swedish iron ore to Germany, which made helping Finland directly a tricky proposition for them.
So Finland felt let down.
Deeply. There was a strong sense of being deceived about potential Western intervention, which never really materialized in time or force to make a difference. They were essentially alone.
So facing military collapse, they had to seek peace. How did that happen?
The Finnish government, though not unanimous at first, started putting out feelers to Moscow, mainly through their ambassador in Stockholm. Significantly, Moscow dropped the pretense of the Kuusinen puppet government, showing they'd negotiate with Helsinki.
But the terms were harsh.
Incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
On February 12th, they learned the Soviet demands. They wanted even more territory than they'd asked for before the war started.
Adding insult to injury, what finally forced their hand to accept?
The breaking point came on March 9th. The military leadership reported back to the government. The situation on the isthmus was dire. Battalions were down to maybe 250 men each. A total collapse of the front was imminent, potentially days away.
There was no choice left.
None, really. That stark military reality forced the Finnish delegation, Radi and Paasikivi, to accept the terms in Moscow.
So the Moscow Peace Treaty was signed, March 13, 1940. What was the final cost for Finland in terms of land?
It was huge. They lost large chunks of Karelia, the entire isthmus, areas north of Lake Ladoga. It mirrored, actually, territory lost to Russia way back in 1721. Plus, they had to lease the Hanko Peninsula for 30 years as a Soviet naval base and give up some strategic islands.
And the human cost. You mentioned territory, but people lived there.
A massive human cost. Around 420,000 Finns, about 12% of the population then, lost their homes and had to be resettled. Refugees in their own country. Finland lost about 10% of its economic capacity, farmland, industry.
Devastating.
President Kallio, when he had to sign the ratification, reportedly said, "May my hand wither that is forced to sign such a paper," captures the bitterness.
And the casualties in the fighting itself.
Finland lost around 26,600 soldiers killed, over 43,000 wounded. Soviet losses are harder to pin down, estimates vary wildly, but they were far higher. Maybe 127,000 dead or missing, perhaps as high as 270,000, plus huge numbers wounded or suffering from frostbite.
That grim quote comes to mind.
The Soviet officer who said the land they took was just enough to bury their dead. Yeah. It speaks volumes about the price the Soviets paid for their victory.
Beyond Finland and the USSR, did the war have wider consequences?
It definitely did. The Red Army's poor initial showing really damaged its reputation globally. German intelligence, watching closely, seriously underestimated Soviet military capabilities based on this war. That probably played a role in Hitler's decision to invade the USSR in 1941.
An unintended consequence.
Huge. But conversely, the Soviets learned hard lessons. They reformed their military significantly afterwards, improving discipline, bringing back traditional ranks like general to restore officer authority, working on combined arms tactics. They were better prepared in some ways when Germany attacked.
So, wrapping this up, Finland lost territory, suffered terribly. But what's the lasting legacy? They didn't get annexed.
Exactly. Despite everything, Finland kept its independence. That was the ultimate hard-won achievement. And the Winter War absolutely forged that powerful national unity that Sisu became cemented in their identity. It healed those old Civil War wounds in a crucible of fire.
But it left them vulnerable.
Yes, it showed how exposed they were. That led directly to rearming as fast as they could and looking for allies. Tragically, that search led them to align with Germany against the Soviet Union in the Continuation War, starting in 1941, trying to regain what they'd lost. Another chapter entirely.
It's an incredible story of resilience, though. A small nation, facing impossible odds, loses so much, but somehow holds on to its core, its independence, its identity. That Sisu really defines it.
It absolutely does. The Winter War is this stark reminder, isn't it? How national unity, adapting to your environment, sheer grit, how these intangible things can let a smaller nation stand up to a giant, even force that giant to change its approach. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What are the limits of military power when faced with that kind of collective will and determination? How much does that spirit truly count for?